So imagine, I know you want to be an intern that's going to be remembered. Not remembered in the same way that Brad talked about. You don't want to be the one who I remember who I had to take aside and say, now look, we're going to take you home and we're going to dress you so that your skirt actually covers your bottom. Not good. You also don't want to be the member, the intern who, when I was saying, I think you should follow this particular, and he was giving me a little bit of grief, and I said, probably not the wisest thing to say, but I said, I'm old enough to be your mother. You might want to listen to me. He looked straight at me and he said, no, you're old enough to be my grandmother. At which point I said, that's probably not a good thing to say to your boss. I was Mary Landrieu's chief, and we hired 12 interns every summer. Can you imagine? 6 at a time. So being remembered was a challenge. And I want to tell you a little bit about why we remembered some of the interns for the good reasons. We had one intern who was so reliable. We were doing the Affordable Care Act. It was very controversial. Mary Landrieu was a late decider from a very difficult state. And so our interns were helping to answer the phone. And we had a direct relationship. We had to watch Fox News because when the Fox commentator said, call Mary Landrieu and tell her she's out of her mind if she would ever think of supporting this, it would immediately cause the phones to blow up. And so this one intern came to me and said, Jane, I'm just getting exhausted, and this particular person has called me 5 times and has been using the F word. This is sort of the all backstory. And I finally made a rule. I said, once they drop the F-bomb, you can politely say, thank you very much. We'll take your name and get back to you. And she was so excited. She thanked me profusely for the ability to hang up the phone to someone who was being offensive to her. The other thing is to think about something that you can do that is practical, that you can finish in the time you're there. You heard about, if you're a scheduler, be the best scheduler, if you're this. And one of the things to think about is you can be, if you're assigned to scheduling, you can be part of the briefing document. Every senator would go home with a briefing book, right? And you could say, I'll do the briefing on the park in Baton Rouge. And you do the best research and it goes in the briefing document. You remember that. Who was it that said, write down everything you do? Remember, the staff you work with are going to be the ones who are going to provide you reference. When you leave, it's a good time to write and say, thank you for the opportunity to serve. And here's what I remember most, and remind the chief of staff, the staff you worked with, and the member what you did. Because they're doing a million things. Mary used to describe serving in the Senate like being in a washing machine and spin cycle, and she would tell me my job was to stop the cycle and say, Senator, this is what's happening right now. So that's your job, is to remind people. And so when you want a recommendation letter, you have to contact the person you worked with and say, this is Jane Campbell. I worked with you in the summer of 2023, and I created this amazing spreadsheet of everybody that called in favor of the debt ceiling and helped you to communicate with them. And then they can write a letter that says, Dear Marcy, Jane Campbell would be a great person to hire because she absolutely developed this fabulous spreadsheet, and she was so creative and innovative and followed through. This is going to be a much better recommendation than Jane Campbell was a lovely person. She had a great attitude, and she'd be a real advantage to your team. When I get those kind of letters, I'm like, this person has no freaking idea who that person is. So give people the tools to write you a stellar recommendation, and it will make a difference. Good luck.